Well, welcome to the second session of Systemic Team Coaching. It's lovely to see you all here. Sorry that we had to make two sets of rows, but we thought it was more important that we were in some kind of U than have you all in a kind of bus style. So I hope the people at the back don't feel too far away from us. I'm Hilary Lines. This is Louise Buckle. Team coaching, I think I've been working with teams and executive teams for probably over 20 years, and also working as a one-to-one coach. But I think it's reasonable to say that the whole subject of systemic team coaching and team coaching in itself has had a bit of a revival in the last few years. And I think it probably revived as well in my mind, probably because I found myself as an independent executive and team coach being drawn more and more into working with teams where there was conflict, and realizing that it took much more than conflict resolution to really help a team over a sustained period of time. It required me to work at a number of levels, for personal, interpersonal and systemic, in order to bring about lasting change within a team. And we're going to be talking a lot more about that this afternoon. And so I'm an external coach, but have been an internal coach. Before I went external at IBM, working with the board of the consulting business in Europe, and then before that, head of leadership and partner development at PwC Consulting. And Louise is my counterpart here. We're not just dressed similarly, but complementary skills.
So I'm lead coach within KPMG Management Consulting. I'm effectively a coach for that part of the business. They also sponsor and bring in external coaches. And I act as, along with a couple of other people, as the head of coaching. We don't have a formal head of coaching, but three of us share that role across the whole of the business. I'm also still keeping a little bit of private practice going, in part because I could never quite let go of the NHS, which is where I started. When I first came to be sort of thinking again about team coaching and seeing it as like, yeah, this is the thing we've got to get behind, I was seeing that the systemic bit was probably the new, and team coaching was kind of new, and coaching was my roots. And actually, as I started to unpack it, I realised it was exactly the opposite. My systemic roots were strongest from the time that I'd spent in public sector in the NHS, very early in my career, working with the complexities of those systems and the overlapping. And even before we really almost knew what whole system work was, I was setting up projects in very ad hoc and totally off radar kinds of ways to get bits of the system to talk to each other, to get doctors and managers to talk, and institutions in education and delivery to talk to each other. And then I moved into working with Hay and started to use a lot of top team interventions, team coaching. And it was actually during one of those team coaching interventions that I got my first coaching client. So it's really interesting just to stop and think about the heritage that we bring as individuals to this, and where maybe some of the real strengths we have are, and therefore what that's going to mean for how we show up as coaches. So in my role, I'm a sponsor, I'm a deliverer of coaching. I also advise and guide some of our people and change consultants on how they're working with their clients in the field directly, whereas most of my clients personally are directors and partners in the business. So that's why I'm here.
And we wanted to give you a chance to maybe share your questions for us, but also we'd like a sense of where you are in the room. So
Yes. Who are you? Who have we got?
Yeah, we'd like you to kind of talk to, well, how are we going to do this? You can still stand up, despite the fact we've got two rows. We thought there may be a number of roles. Some of you may come from predominantly one-to-one coaching background, and may do one-to-one coaching, maybe thinking about going into team. Some may already be team coaches, that's there. Here's one-to-one. Some of you might be a client of team coaching or coaching. Some of you might work in OD. Some of you might be an internal sponsor or an HR specialist who brings in team coaches. What we'd like you to do is to go to the station which you feel most affinity with. Some of you might have a mixture of affinities. and just share with the people that you find there, assuming you're going to find people there, what are some of the questions that you have in terms of the whole area of systemic team coaching?
So if you're going to see how the perspectives differ.
Stay in the middle, Chuck. Stay in the middle.
What's that?
Where do you have the affinity? What do you like?
Oh, it's very dangerous. So,
yeah, the effect of that.
But I think it's what's quite
need a systemic approach.
I don't really know.
Systemic process.
Really. Well, that's taking into account the context that you're working in. That's what I think.
I think you help us with systemic, not necessarily answer it. So I think it's just, or even just, what's the question you have for this session? Systemic is we will explain that when we come to it, but it's really about coaching the team within the wider system, coaching the team when it's together, and coaching the team when it's out in the world. So it's not just facilitating team for a session. It's looking at it within the relationship of its sponsors and stakeholders and the people it serves.
Okay. So it's linked with the organisation and
Yes.
everybody, all its stakeholders, effectively.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it possible to coach a team? Is my question.
Okay.
Or only possible to coach individuals?
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So just share one or two questions. You might want to go into smaller gatherings, otherwise you might feel a bit constrained about the size of your team.
Yeah. Just for a few minutes, just to get a sense of what the questions are for you.
So, how much time? We don't want to give them
Just one more minute.
1 more minute. Quite easy conversation.
Yes,
For me, again, I'd probably be more over there, but actually what I find is all the time, not coaching class, but facilitating events. And so really, I just want to find out, well, where's the boundaries? What's the difference? I'm just become one of the hands on. A bit like in coaching, five teams. You're brought in.
but the organisation has structure. And then maybe that's my
I wasn't sure. So it's about the organisation rather than about the approach.
I mean, I understand that an organisation is coming up with organisation is a system, and so it's dynamic. Something's happening here, what's the impact over here?
Okay, let's come. Close down your conversation. Sorry, it's a bit rushed. Maybe we can hear a question from each group. What sort of things you've been discussing? What might be a burning question from you? So we have one from.
I'm happy to.
Yes.
Well, I do a lot of one-to-one coaching, and I've always been interested in team coaching.
Yeah.
And I've done a limited amount, but mediocre at best. And the last one was where I had coached some of the individuals as individuals and the rest I hadn't. And it went for about 2 or 3 sessions, and then they decided it wasn't really going anywhere, and they stopped the team coaching program. And of course I assumed a lot of that, you know, what I wasn't doing well as a team coach. So I have a real dilemma now about, you know, I have probably self-limiting beliefs about my capability as a team coach.
Right.
So I'm just...
Can you narrow it down into one question that you would have that we can share or address for the group as a whole?
Yeah, I think what are the approaches that a one-to-one coach needs to adopt to move effectively into team coaching?
Yeah, great, great, thank you. Okay, what else?
Other one-to-one group? Is it possible to coach a team?
Is it possible to coach a team? No. Is there something behind that question?
Well, does it inevitably come a one-to-one coaching? But I think what's behind it is the training and experience of coaching is one-to-one.
Yes.
With all that goes with that, and then how is it possible then to relate to a number of people? Maybe I've got to what team coaching is wrong, but if it's relating to a number of people all at once.
Yes.
How
Okay. So what I guess I'm hearing is team coaching actually a culmination of lots of one-to-one coaching, and then that may be one aspect of your question.
Is it?
And then what are you actually coaching if you're coaching more than one person? Great. Okay. Thank you. What about from over here, the OD change people?
Yeah, we had several questions, but one was about what is systemic?
What is systemic? Great.
And when we discussed it, we had different definitions. So
Okay,
to
we
ask.
definitely have that on the agenda to address. Thank you. Anything from
The question is, how do you keep it sticky? And this is with the assumption that team coaching is over a course of time. It's not a one-off activity.
Right.
It's taking a team with an outcome for the business,
Yeah.
for themselves, for the team. So how do you keep the momentum? And in particular, as well as when it's a virtual, multicultural, as the add-on.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you keep it sticky in terms of the momentum?
The momentum, yes.
And is that about sustaining as well?
Yes, it
And
is.
sustaining
Yes.
the behaviour? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
both.
Okay. Thanks.
Can I just throw another one in?
Yeah.
What are the practicalities of designing a session?
Practicalities of designing a
Yeah.
session. Okay. We may get to that. That sounds quite situational, but
Just broad terms.
Yeah.
Broad terms.
Yeah.
How it will
Yeah.
be structured in an effective way.
Okay. Let's see if we can come to that.
I think what we'll find ourselves talking about there is the place of a session, as opposed to the content of a session.
Yes.
It's what do we mean when we say a session? Yeah, in the bigger picture. But we'll definitely talk about that.
So anything from the sponsors?
It's more on the return on investment and the effectiveness of team coaching. How do you measure it?
How do you measure the effectiveness? How do you measure the return on investment? Yeah, we have some views about that. I'm not sure we have a numerical answer, but we have some views about that. Is there anything else in terms of the questions? We've got, what does a one-to-one coach need to do? Is it possible to coach a team? What is the systemic? How to keep it sticky? How to keep the momentum? Practicalities of designing a session? ROI? Anything else that's burning? Yeah.
There was one that came up, the last which was what's the difference between facilitation and team coaching.
Right. Okay.
There's
Yeah.
another one here. If it's
Conversational as far as we can. And you'll notice that we introduce ourselves, but we also have a relationship that we're bringing into this session, which may sound like a flippant point, but we believe that actually for many teams, it's important to co-coach, to have a team coach that you coach with, because it's very complex. It's a complex system, and it can really help to have a coach that you can work with. Often it really doesn't help when you've got a coach that you can't work with. That can sometimes I've had the experience of being less than the sum of the parts with my co-coach. So what we intend to do is be quite transparent about how we're working. So you'll see us talking to each other so that we know how to somehow flex what we're doing. But overall, the flow of the session is, we want to answer your question about what is systemic team coaching. What do we think is unique about this, and what's different about it compared to all of the other types of team intervention that get talked about: development, team building, facilitation, etc. And then, very important in the context of this overall conference about competitive advantage, where can we most add value as systemic team coaches? And what is this concept of added value when we're talking about team coaching? So where is it of value, and how can we most add value in terms of the skills and perspectives that we believe are important to us as we continue to try to be more effective at this interesting and complex craft. And that's essentially the flow: the what, the where, the how we can most add value. Introducing also some models, one particular model of team coaching that we use on the diploma programme here, which I'm part of the faculty, which has been developed by Peter Hawkins. Has anyone here read Peter Hawkins' latest book? So we'll be introducing to that model, which is a foundational and core model that helps, in a way, orientate a lot of the work we do and allow you to work with that. So.
And along the way, we'll be just dripping in examples from our working practice. So we're not offering a case study as such. We're just feeding in, I did this then and I saw that happen there, and so on, so that we can share some of our experience to date. Recognising, certainly for me anyway, that I still feel very much a novice in this field. I think it's quite a sophisticated offer to clients, and we're still in very early days of beginning to shape what it actually means. And there are lots of debates around what is facilitation and what is a team and so on, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I do feel that it's an ongoing inquiry in which we can all participate, but with respect to what we know and what we don't know, showing some real sensitivity around that.
So, move on.
Right. So, this is the Katzenbach and Smith definition of a team: a small number of people with a complementary skill set who are committed to a common purpose, set of performance goals and approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Does that kind of feel about right to most people? So is a learning set a team? Is a learning set a team? No.
Well, it could be. If it was a team that came together as a learning set. I mean,
what would make it a team?
They were people with a common purpose.
So it's a common purpose.
Yes.
Is learning a common purpose?
For me, it was about an organisational purpose rather than learning.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. What about others? Any other view on that?
It could be.
Could be.
Learning outcomes.
Okay. This is a debate. We've been round and round and round with a working group in Apex who are trying to pull together some standards for professional executive coaches or team coaching. And the starting point was, so A, what's a team? How many people does it take to have a team? And then what's the definition? What does the work have to be about in order for us to be able to say this is team coaching? And we still haven't actually resolved it. We're still working with the tension between those who would say that learning is an outcome, and I'd be on the other side saying, actually, no, it's got to be an organisational purpose, something that is about a tangible output for the organisation that makes it a mutual commitment to a common endeavour. So there is no definitive answer that we can give you on this, and I think what's going to be interesting as you think about any roles that you want to take on as team coaches is what answer do you want to give to that question, and how will you position it?
I would have thought team has to continue after the intervention. Doesn't it? It's a learning set that just comes together for...
Does it? So you can have project teams, we have engagement teams, we provide team coaching to teams that just go out on the client side doing a particular piece of work.
In the context of team coaching, does it exist after the intervention?
Yeah, one of the things that came up in the previous group was, we might call it team coaching, the client's going to call it team building or just an away day, or they don't recognise the aspect of it as being team coaching that we wouldn't make in team coaching. Another approach to this is not just what does the client think or what's the content, what are we working with, or even who are we working with, but how are we coming at it as coaches? Are we coming at it from the point of view there's a skill set that I have that I apply in this context of facilitation and coaching skills of inquiry one-to-one, And that's what makes it team coaching. Am I coming at it from the point of view of there's a practice and a process that I'm using, maybe using other consultancy type models like Beckard, goals, roles, processes, relationships, as a way of getting underneath the skin of what's going on with that client? Or am I saying, no, I'm coming from a place which is relationship based, because actually that's what I do as a coach. I operate as a coach based on the quality of the relationship I have one-to-one. And I think the identity that you have as a coach and how you hold that, and the kind of signature presence you have, one would hope would show up in the way that you approach team coaching. And it's going to show up not just in the what you do, but how you shape it, how you frame it, what purposes you use it for, and so on. So it's still quite an ill-defined field, and in a way it's for us to collectively come together and put some shape around it.
Yeah, or all of the above.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, because sort of the issues around, we're talking about collective now, really, is a bunch of, because if a manager says, I want you to coach my team, now what do? Do we spend a month with them defining what they mean by team and what they want to do with it, or do we actually talk to the manager or the team about, well, what actually outcome do you want, what are you looking for, what do you want to be different, and then just go off and do it? So that's a bit where I'm at.
It's interesting. The three questions I think I would ask if I was asked that question would be, A, what is the team responsible for doing? Tell me more about the team purpose. Do you mean collectively or independently? So is it that you want me to coach the individuals because you want them to individually get some benefit, or are you looking for some synergistic collective benefit to come from this? And the point about time, what's your commitment here? Are you prepared to go on a journey around teams? And for me, that's one of the big distinguishing factors from facilitation and team coaching. Facilitation is a one-off, it's task-focused. Team coaching is a relationship that it's a commitment you make to that team over time to stay connected. And Peter Hawkins talks about coaching the team when they're together and when they're apart. And I again think that's a really, really important part of the team coaching engagement, is what you do not in the room when you've got them all together, but what you do in the little side conversations, or in the preparatory interviews, or in the follow-up from the consequences of some conflict or issues that emerge during the session with individuals. How we stay connected to the team as individuals as well as the collective is for me a very important part of the process, and actually makes it easier to do, I feel, in an internal position. So at the moment I'm doing a bit of private work again with the team, and I feel more disconnected from them. It's harder to really get alongside them, because I don't have that ad hoc, moment-by-moment contact that I have in KPMG.
I think the real core piece here is about the common purpose for which they're mutually accountable. And part of the reason for always sharing this sort of definition is that it helps clarify the role of the team coach, because there's also this thing called group coaching, which means many things to many people. What it means to me is that I'm coaching a number of individuals in how they might learn together, or they might coach each other. But essentially they're a cohort, we're not talking about a shared purpose.
I've got an example at the moment. I'm just about to start doing some work with some of our directors, and it's individual work. We'll be using individual diagnostics, but I'm doing it in a group setting because I want them to build trust and a sense of collaboration around their ongoing learning. But that's not for me team coaching. It's a group environment in which we're going to do some coaching-based exercises and discussions. So systemic team coaching then is a process of working with the whole team, both when they're together and when they're apart. Coaching them to help them work out how they're going to collaborate around their collective leadership, to achieve their common purpose and performance objectives, not their individual ones, and effectively engage with their key stakeholder groups. And that's the crucial part that makes it systemic. It's not just about what's happening in the team, in the interpersonal dynamics between those members. It's the relationship of the team to other parts of the system, so that they can jointly transform the wider business. They're having an impact out with just their own direct performance. That's the definition of systemic team coaching that is embedded in Peter's book, isn't it? And I would totally subscribe to that.
I think we've improved it, actually.
And this is another way of looking at that, maybe a sort of like more pictorial way. And
sometimes I label this model the areas of attention of a systemic team coach, because you do have to have a number of different lenses on the organisation and to work at a number of different levels. So as you see, we've got individuals, interpersonal, the connection, the relationship between two people that we saw so brilliantly displayed on the stage just now, how behaviour in one influenced the connection between them. The dynamics in the team, the patterns and behaviour, the culture that they may well not be aware of, that almost seems to happen independently of them as individuals. Their tasks, the team task mission, the what they're supposed to be doing, what they're commissioned to do, the stakeholder interfaces, and then the wider world, the political, economic, social environment, the technological environment, how their external clients and customers, what they're demanding of them, and how those pressures impact on the work of the team. I'm sure a number of you have seen massive changes in the dynamic and the culture of teams in the last 3 or 4 years as the economic environment becomes tougher. There's a lot more stress, and it all gets played out in teams and in relationships, and people take it personally, and it's not necessarily personal. And so it becomes disruptive behaviour. And if I think about, say for example, one of these clients who has invited me in because of broken down relationships between two team members, in a sense the presenting issue is probably somewhere between here and here. But the way I would normally address the issue is first to understand from each individual where they see the issue, each individual in the team, but then very much work at, there's another layer in here, the intra-individual first, how helping each individual understand how their behaviour doesn't necessarily, their actual behaviour in the team doesn't necessarily represent their intended behaviour, and also how that's being affected by people in the outside world who are putting pressure on them for performance or demand or whatever, and then bring 2 or 3 or 4 people together to help them see how that relationship plays out live in the room. And then also, so with greater level of awareness about how we need to work together and how we can work productively together, how are we then going to reshape our mission and intent in order to work more effectively with our stakeholders? How are we going to put ourselves on a more partnering relationship here so that the tensions in this level of relationship don't impact on these and indeed on personal stress? So it's actually moving between those levels and being aware where each plays in, that the systemic team coach needs to work. And I think in the context of competitive advantage and value, you can see, I hope, that at each of these levels, value can be lost. And if I think of myself as a team coach in helping the organisation to have conversations that they need to have in order to enhance the value across the difference of people, of team, of group, of perspective, then that's about increasing competitive advantage. It's about giving more value, creating conversations within the organisation. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with people? Because so the organisations are made up of divisions of difference, and often that means avoidance or war or conflict. And if we can build those connections, so much the better.
Can I ask
bring them onto the
question of the group, which is, as coaches, as individual coaches, we are often working in the interpersonal space. We have our relationship with the client in the room, that's an interpersonal relationship. We're working with what's going on in the client's head. The subject matter is team dynamics, team tasks, stakeholder, wider systemic, depending on what they bring. Has anyone got any sense of what they think is different when it's not the subject matter of the individual, but something that is present and there to be worked on live with the whole team? Just a little question that's just kind of occurred to me as you were talking there, really. What does that ask of us as coaches to move from a place of working one-to-one with that as content that the client brings to something that we're immersed in and part of when we're with a team? Any thoughts?
It's the risk.
The risk? Whose risk?
As a coach, and depending on how much the group are prepared to engage in that. It's in the room as opposed to being, you're seeing it in front of you as opposed to it being relayed to you by one person one-to-one.
Yeah. Behind?
It's quite a similar point when you've got more data to go on. You can see what's happening in the room. Someone else. People have problems with each other. It's apparent.
Hold on to these thoughts, yeah?
I think a piece is that you become part of the system more visibly when you're in a team coaching context.
I think that for me is the thing that's triggered by that thinking most, is that it makes much more apparent than maybe is always held in one-to-one coaching that I'm part of the system. And so the place that I have when I'm acting as team coach in that system is something that we have to be very, very aware of.
And to build on that is a greater need to clarify your role within that system or expectations, kind of goes into the contracting, but from my perspective is for what that system, that team needs. So there's a lot around expectations of you and what they want to be on.
And a lot of self-management, because it's easy to get pulled into that, and be part of it, and knowing that point where you feel the pull and standing back and saying, no, keep holding the mirror.
More reflective practice.
Absolutely.
And I suppose one of the ways that shows up is, and just thinking about a review that I've done with the team that I've been working with, their reflection back to me is, in hindsight, Louise, we wanted you to be a bit more directive. What we wanted was you to come in and tell us what to do, create the structure and the process and be a facilitator. And what you did was coached us. So I'm going to go away and take that as a kind of, a bit like you were talking, I'm going to take that as a pat on the back, that what I stuck to was a coaching style, even though they're going, well, actually it would have been nice if you put a bit more structure in it, a bit more directive.
Because they're an expert culture. They want you to do
that's what they're going to want.
So we thought we'd like to invite you just to spend a couple of minutes reflecting on an organisation that you're very familiar with. You might work there, or you might have worked there. You might be coaching there or consulting there. And just to take a kind of 30,000-foot view of that organisation. Now, I'm not saying it's going to necessarily look like that. That was my example of, how there are different groups as a board, an exec, the CEO, maybe divisions and departments and teams. There's the outside world, clients, shareholders, customers, etc. The wider community. Where do you think value is lost at the boundaries of that organisation? From your perspective, you may not have a whole view. Where's value being lost at the boundaries between people and groups? And where's that value most significant? And how far do you think that's the job of the systemic team coach to help those teams or those individuals restore or gain value, have value-creating conversations? So, it might be between departments, or it might be a team in its relation to its clients, or it could be between individuals. You might have a sense of, gosh, if only those guys would get on, that would really, really help. Or it might be between a team and the people that report to them. You could see value being lost. But just have a couple of minutes reflecting on that. Then we'll present you with the other model, and we'll get you to do a little bit more discussion around it.
So just maybe the person next to you, just a little bit of which team have I got in mind?
It's a 5-discipline model, but it comes in stages, so this is a 4-discipline model, developed by Peter Hawkins. And then we will ask you to go back to the situations you've been reflecting on and use this model to have another look at it. And so as you see, 4-box model, dimensions the task and what the team is there to do, and then the how in terms of the people. And then what's outside the team and what's inside the team. And I think coming back to one of those questions about the difference between other forms of intervention and systemic team coaching, my hunch is that a lot of team building would tend to go on in this category. So the what and inside is about clarifying the purpose, the goals, the roles, who's accountable, and coming to a shared view
about that clarity. And then co-creating, which is about how the team works together, the personal dynamics, the relationships, the processes that teams use to structure their work. But then if we look over here, one thing that is interesting and maybe not surprising, that often the issue that the leader of the team comes to, the presenting issue in a team that asks for help, is often not the place where you need to start the work. So one particular client I'm working with at the moment, the things they told me right up front were, well, we're not actually making much impact on the organisation, and people out there don't really know who we are. And we don't seem to be able to reach decisions very well down here, maybe a little bit here. And so this particular team was created as a horizontal structure, a consulting, the leadership of a consulting line, service line, within a consulting business where the vertical is about client facing. And so the team was brought together to build consulting capability across a number of client groups. And so it had a core purpose around promoting career development and learning across the consulting practice. But what became clear once I started to inquire in depth in the individuals within the team and talking to some key stakeholders was that even though they had been anointed, as it were, by the board in terms of their task, that task was not at all clear. They weren't clear what they're accountable for delivering. So what does the external board or the external stakeholders, what are they demanding and requiring of this team? What do they see as their unique contribution to the business? And how is that being communicated through their everyday actions and behaviours? But even though it might be written down, the relationship may not be such that actually that can happen in practice. So one of the first things with that particular team was to help them clarify what that commission was and to start having more two-way partnering conversations with the board about, well, if that's what you want, then actually we need this in order to work in that way.
We need just add to build on that,
yeah.
that sort of direction of clarification. It could appear to the team that it's when they make up their minds and tell us what they really want.
Yes.
Yet the reality is, and I think the space that the team coach needs to operate within is, what's the quality and the nature of the dialogue that you're having with that commissioner, or commissioners plural? Because there'll be different pressures, particularly in very matrixed organisations. Different people, different communities, different leaders have got different expectations of the team.
Yeah,
and so you're never going to get a perfect answer. The question is, how is the team dialoguing internally about what the external world is asking of us, and how are they then having that conversation with those multiple stakeholders to create an identity for themselves and a value add to the business that works for everybody. So it's not about certainty, it's about dialogue.
It's about a different type of relationship, and it's about a different type of leadership, so that this team is taking leadership in its relationship with its stakeholders, even if they may be under them, junior to them, within the hierarchy.
Can be low.
And which is a particular challenge for this team, as I'm sure it's the same number of teams you work with, because they're trying to create a very much more learning culture within a structure which is quite top-down, quite hierarchical. And so this cultural, the conversation across this cultural difference is very significant. And of course impacts on particularly here about how this team needs to work and take its own leadership and how it then needs to connect with the outside world.
And again, it's where do you start? Some people would say you start with where the need is, others would say you start with where the team is. One of the teams I was working with recently was definitely seeing real challenges around the dynamics in the team, and the team leader had a belief that teams should be happy places. That was driving, you know, a high-performing team is a happy team. We all go out to the pub after work and we have a really, really good time, and we're well bonded, and you can have proper, honest conversations. And that's a good team, and that's what you're going to create for us, Louise, isn't it? This really good, high-performing team. Meanwhile, what they're there to do, the kind of real sense of common purpose and the goals was very, very unclear. But that's not what they thought they wanted. They wanted the let's get on better, shall we? So we have to sometimes start with where the team is, but notice the gap and be prepared to kind of stretch them into that gap. Others would, for example, some of the models that are out there, particularly some of the early models around team effectiveness, would suggest that you start with vision and then strategy and then what's the objective of the team. And when you've done all of that, and then you can look at the roles that the team members play, and then you can look at the systems that you've got within the team and how the processes of team organisation and management are actually working, and then you can go into the slightly tricky area of relationships. And I think what we're saying with systemic team coaching is it's all up for grabs. You start wherever. You know, you start where the team's comfortable starting. You start where you can see some room to make some progress, and you can do that because you've got the team committed to a relationship. And I think that again is one of these distinctions. It's the distinction between a relationship-based approach to team coaching and a facilitation / event organised approach to team coaching. That gives you the space to do that.
And we're not saying we then might start here, do lots, and then go here. We're actually keeping them all in perspective.
Around, yeah.
So it's just a cyclical thing.
Yeah.
And then to put the fifth discipline so beautifully.
When you've got a lack of clarity maybe in the stakeholders commissioning the work of the team and there a conversation is needed, do you work with just the team to help them to have that dialogue externally, or have you been in a situation where you've actually brought the commissioning person or stakeholder in and they've been part of the conversation?
Both.
Okay.
Both. Sometimes they bring them in.
Because that sort of difference between facilitator and coach, I'm not quite clear in my head.
Yes, okay. I mean, I use facilitator as a word which goes back to the Latin, which is to enable.
Yes.
And facilitation is what you might do in any particular meeting. It's to enable a conversation to happen.
Yes.
The coach is really more about the longer term relationship with the team and helping the team perform, essentially. And so the kind of the metaphor, the coach is on the stage, and the coach is not on the stage. The team's on the stage, and the coach is really helping it to perform. It's kind of a useful one in terms of the coaching. Anyway, the stakeholders. It's about. It happens in many ways. We'll maybe talk a bit about the inquiry that's necessary in order to start coaching in the first place. But often in the inquiry stage, when we're looking at, so what are the challenges and issues around the team, we will involve stakeholders in that inquiry and therefore feedback. But sometimes we will ask them to go and talk to their stakeholders. So they're actually forming and building their relationship as they're doing it. And sometimes we might bring them in. It varies.
So I think that's what I'm grappling with. So, because so either the statement or the question is, would it be helpful if you went and talked to your primary client or your head of service? Well, that's kind of the directive. It's a coach steering it where they're perceiving it should be going. Yes, dressed up or not.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm being too simplistic. I know it's a complicated game, but the other part of me was thinking, well, hang on a moment. I thought when I'm coaching, I'm helping the group decide, the collective group of individuals, what do they want to do. So there's the tension between you're sitting there thinking, why don't you go and talk to them then, or whatever, versus them saying, do you know what? What we really should be doing is going and having a conversation with.
Yes. Well, I think my stance, just to see if I could just respond to that quickly, my stance is similar to if I was a one-to-one coach. I will be enabling or working with the client to reach their own decisions, their own insights, but I would probably be saying, what's the wider system thinking here, or what would the CEO be saying about this? So I think as a team coach, I would be saying, actually, if I'm really working with you, we have to attend to all of these areas. And actually, normally, the result of an inquiry is that they'll
fall into these areas. So you had an interesting
Well, I had one
section
recently
earlier.
where we had lots to say in clarifying, lots to say in co-creating, some to say in connecting, and virtually nothing. The absence of comment, of any kind of reflection in the space that was the commissioning, itself was data that was able to reflect back to the team. And,
So just one more
that's
thing,
the blind spot.
because I'm a facilitator most of the time, as well as sort of grappling.
Yeah.
So, you know, what a facilitator will say is, do you know what, I'm hearing a lot of people saying a lot about what we need to be doing about finding out what we're all about and where we need to go. I'm not hearing everybody saying about, should we go and find out if anybody else can help us where we need to go and what we have to do. Now, you know, whether that's coaching or facilitation, I guess is what I'm grappling with in terms of the model here, and what's right and what's wrong. Or if it works, just do it.
My experience of team coaching is that it is all of those things. And the thing that makes it coaching is it's crucially the commitment over time to a relationship, that we're on a journey together. And it is that we do things outside of events. So there might be some one-to-one work that you pick up. There's maybe coaching the team leader. There's the little nudges and coffee corridor conversations that enable you to shift the energy somewhat in the group and to help them think about how there's an individual they want to show up the next time you meet. And the other thing that for me is crucially different is that as a team coach, I can be in the room with the team doing nothing. As a facilitator, I'm going to be up front structuring the event. I've got the pen, I'm managing the process, I've kind of got the agenda.
No, a good facilitator knows when to sit back and let it roll.
And knows when to sit back and let it roll. But as a coach, I deliberately position myself in the group. I don't sit at the head. I will encourage them to have an active meeting, and for them as to weave in some moments of coaching into their normal day-to-day business. So it's not a away day or a special thing, or we're going to have some team coaching on. It's, I'm going to be alongside you as you do your stuff.
Oh, so generally it's not set up as a coaching session for the team. It's just
It can be. I'm a resource to the team is more where I'm kind of coming from. I'm a resource to you. How do you want to use me in the conversation we have up front and keep on having? You know, what's working, what's not working? Do you need to take some time out to do X? Should I just come in and do a bit more observation? How are you getting on with stakeholders? Those are the kinds of questions we might explore and work with.
Get on it at all. Because even I'm acting in a consultancy mode with a company or a department, I'll be doing all of those things. I'll be hanging out there for maybe weeks or possibly months. Sometimes directive, sometimes non-intrusive in the background.
So
asking all those things.
Well? Are you a coach?
I hope so.
And so what would you tell me, what would you say is your signature presence as a coach? What makes you stand out as a coach? What's that really about?
Well, I think it has to do with my values and my beliefs on some of the theories that underpins what I do. I bring the whole lot together.
And how do you know when you're coaching and when you're facilitating? Do you have when you just do one-to-one coaching versus one-to-one instruction, say? How do you define that boundary?
Well, I'd like to think when I'm being a coach, I'm being non-directive as far as possible, but occasionally I might be prescriptive depending on the framework of the model I'm using. For instance, if I'm using Heron's 6 styles of intervention, there's both the directive and the facilitative one. I'll do the same in facilitation. So I came from a school of facilitation where I was originally prescriptive or directive, and I'm trying to moderate that to that point. But hopefully it's a very dynamic process rather than either or.
And there may be others who have started in a very different place, started fundamentally maybe from the psychotherapeutic tradition, and are bringing that, and what they need to move into is to challenge maybe some of those assumptions around non-directiveness. So I think as we each move into this space, we come with our baggage, we come with our experience, we come with our own mental models, and we're all going to work out what does team coaching look like in a way that's authentic for me based on my coaching practice to operate now with a group.
And my OD practice and my facilitation practice.
I think I know when I have been coaching is when I'm surprised by what happens.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. That's a really nice text, isn't it? Yeah.
I wonder as well as, and this is just in my own understanding of the difference between team coaching and facilitation, is that in team coaching, the individual or individuals bring more of themselves to the work. In other words, reflecting perhaps the impact, bringing in what they've noticed, so bringing more of themselves to the actual work with the team, as opposed to facilitation, where there may not be as much of that.
Are you talking about the individual coach or the individual team members?
I'm talking about the individual team coach or team coaches, who bring their own self.
Share your own process and your own emotions and
even what they're observing.
Yes.
So
but then I think a good facilitator will do that too.
Yeah.
I think it's more about the long-term relationship and the versatility that you have between first inquiring what's really underneath making this team buzz in its systemic context, and what are the cultural and pattern issues around the team, then often structuring some kind of intervention. It may be a 2-day workshop or a 1-day workshop, and as Louise said, observing and working alongside the leader and working alongside the individual team members and reshaping. It's a very malleable piece of work over a period of time. That's what we're talking about. So it draws on all these other, but it's not actually totally distinct from all these other types of intervention.
Can I ask one more question, please, and I'll keep quiet. This is just an answer on the side.
Yeah.
I imagine if I'm dealing with a coaching issue, it is an individually related issue. It's personal to me. Whereas if it's a team coaching issue, it is something that is common, generic to the team. Is this another way of looking at it?
Not quite for me, because I think that's what makes it coaching. If it was a common generic issue for the team, then it might be, it's kind of like a problem around which we're going to facilitate and coming to a solution. Whereas I think the team coaching can include, this is an issue for me. So I'm a director in the firm, I'm concerned about my career progression. I want to make sure I'm getting the right kind of roles and responsibilities, the right access to the right clients to prove myself over the next year so that I can become a partner. So actually I've got a very, very personal agenda that needs to be on the table so that we can collectively look at how we're going to respond to that person's need. Because if we don't meet it, they're just going to subvert our agenda in another way, because they're going to be single-mindedly concerned about how do I progress to partner. And, my sales, I want them, bugger everybody else, basically. So you could say that as a challenge around how do we work collectively to generate X million pounds worth of income for the team, or you can see it as an issue of how do we resolve the tensions that exist between the individual agendas in the room.
So who do you define as your client? Is it the team?
Very good question. It's the team.
And what happens when your clients, the team is more than one person, when your client's agendas conflict?
That's the team coaching. Everybody's. And that's so you don't meet the need, you surface the need. So the key phrase that I use when I'm talking about team coaching is my role is to make the team visible to itself. And if the team can see what's happening in the room, in the moment, it's got more choices. And if it can find a way of comfortably articulating that, then it's moving forward in terms of how it manages conflict and difference and works with that and builds on that.
It makes me think of the game again. Tim Gore says performance equals potential minus interference.
Yes. Absolutely.
If the individuals can more account as interfering in their personal performance, therefore not releasing potential, all of those added together means the team is not releasing its potential.
Yes,
exactly.
So getting out there.
Absolutely. And not getting the potential out of their connection with each other.
Yes.
So we added the core learning piece, the fifth discipline, and we take no blame for the alliteration in this model, I should say. Because it's central, that another critical role of the team coach is how it learns from its practice. So how, over the course of the coaching program, it's learning about this relationship, how it needs to manage this relationship with its commissioning stakeholders, how it's learning
how to get a shared endeavour, and how it's learning how to translate that into a way of working that's going to enable it to fulfil it. And so building in reflection and learning and integration of the thinking between the individuals is a core activity. And again, it's sometimes where we start, helping a team to take on ways of dialogue and listening to each other, so that they can start to actually appreciate what's in the room rather than yes but continually. So sometimes we start there as well. But I like to see that as it's almost a kind of it's a turning circle that helps feed the rest of the growth of the team. Now, we want to give you a bit of time to have a look at this and thinking about your the situation that you were talking about or reflecting about before. And if you were reflecting on your own, maybe come together with someone else. Should we go in fours?
Yeah, 3 fours.
Maybe 2. So return to the point about confidentiality and contracting. So,
which is the book you would recommend over enhanced ones?
Peter Hawkins' Leadership Team Coaching.
Leadership Team Coaching.
And you'll get the slides anyway, I think they're on the website, don't they, so you can get access to all these slides.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're discussing a model which has a long-term project.
Yes.
How do you build in innate adaptability to the team? So that if somebody leaves, somebody comes in, they can adapt. Or if the commission changes, but it's the same team, how do they adapt?
I think that's a really interesting question. In fact, that's the reality of my organisation.
There is no status quo, and never has been.
Yeah. So having a reasonably solid starting point, I think, is quite important. So I've delayed a couple of team coaching assignments till a change that we knew was going to happen had happened, and we got the right people in. But the reality is change is happening all the time. And that's what the team needs to learn about then, is how do we welcome in new people? How do we say goodbye to those who leave? That's part of the process. And again, it goes back to why I say, for me, team coaching is about a relationship. So what I'm saying is I'm alongside you for this next year. That's what I'm here for. And things will change, and we know they're probably going to change. And with one of my teams, it got disbanded. But the team leader took me into his new team. So I'm now working with the reconfigured team, even though that original one was disbanded. And I've picked up the pieces with a few of those who have now been scattered around the organisation. And I'm asking them to think about how they can take what they learned from the team coaching experience into their new teams and how it's enabling them to land differently. So I'm carrying that learning back into new teams now, sort of helping them do that. So I think the relationship issue is really important. The emergent contracting is also really important. I don't contract for the whole programme and say I'm going to see you every third Thursday or for 3 hours or whatever it happens to be, or every quarter we'll have a day away. It's we'll move into the space, we'll do a bit of diagnostic work, we'll have a sort of feedback session, and then we'll see where we go. And for me, it's much more emergent, but then that's how I coach. So it's an authentic reflection of my stance. Others, so one of the partners I was working with recently in a co-coaching situation, his stance is much more structured and planful. So he was struggling with that and would have rather have known that we've got X number of points in the future that allow me to take some risks now because I know I've got that opportunity and that commitment to see them. So I think there's something here about how we contract around commitments and what commitment looks like. I don't need the concrete nature of X session in 3 months' time to feel like the team's made a commitment.
And that's easier for you being an internal.
It's easier for me to be, but I do the same with my externals as well. I'm doing it in an initiative way because that is authentic to my core stance.
Yeah, sure.
So I think that's why I was asking the question about personal sort of stance as a one-to-one coach, because I believe it's got to show up in our team coaching too. Otherwise we're not being authentic, we've just packaged a set of skills. And it couldn't possibly be coaching if we weren't being authentic, in my view. Does that help?
And I think when new members come in, I often ask the team to bring them in and share the learning they've had, so it actually brings them into the process, as well as helping them catch up on my perspective. So, what else? Any insights from using this model to look at the organisational team that you?
I think I'm going to see the similarity in coaching as well, just how incredibly important the source of the whole process is. Going back to source, what was the energy for all this in the first place, and critically important that is to the possibility that we're being successful.
Yes, yes, yes. And the energy, of course, may be different from different team members as well, so they might have different perspectives. But somehow tapping into that through an inquiry process and helping then the team to share the data. Often, what I often do is just inquire, conduct a semi-structured inquiry, but then populate this type of model and use that as a way of having a conversation about issues that they haven't yet had a conversation about. So helping them to bring their truth more openly to the team. There is also a 360 online questionnaire which is run by our consultancy group using this model, which is another alternative, particularly if you don't have time to do the one-to-one inquiry. The data is often very similar, but I personally, as a coach, feel more empowered if I've had a one-to-one conversation.
Well, I should imagine that something rather like this, with each of these, would create a really interesting conversation.
What are you pointing to?
Well, these positions.
Oh, the positions.
Clarifying, commissioning, co-creating, elected positions would actually produce really interesting conversations.
The other thing I can't remember if I said it yet in this group or I said it in the previous group is, I think I said that the team is the client.
The team in its context.
The team in the whole is the client, in my view. That was a very powerful message I got from John Louis Joyce when he came into KPMG to do some work with us about team coaching. And what that then means is my early conversations with the team leader about their team, because you always pretty much get drawn in by the team leader, not by a team member, to do the work. I have to put that forefront of mind with them, and I have to make it very explicit that we're not doing anything until I've spoken to the team individually, but also I don't even want to speak to the team individually until I've seen the team as a collective. And we've talked about whether they're all up for it, how we're going to hold confidentiality, how we're going to deal with the fact that maybe I'm coaching the team leader as well, and all of a sudden I'm turning up here in the team with you guys. So are you going to feel like I'm really on their side rather than yours? I think all of that has to be on the table before we can move forward. And then you can think about, well, am I the right person, or should I be getting somebody else in? And the value of having a co-coach in that situation is you bring somebody new in if you've been coaching the team leader, and it just creates a slight shift in the power dynamics. And again, this is about really, really working the fact that I've got a place in this system that I'm about to move into with you as a team member. I'm not a team member, but I have a place here, and we have to really understand what that is and negotiate what it is so that you're all comfortable with it.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry we're a bit